All right, could someone in chat? I didn't. I just noticed that, so I'll have to start over, which is okay, and then I'll just clip the video. So hopefully sound is coming through now. Can someone in chat tell me if that's the case? I just noticed. Okay, so I will start over, and then I'll clip those first few minutes off the video. So we are in week 4. Oh, so you didn't even hear me say good morning, and thanks for being here. If you can make the live stream, I always appreciate having some folks. So I will start completely over, and then I'll go edit the video to get rid of the no sound portion. So we are in week 4, which puts us about a quarter of the way through the semester, which feels really, really good. Someone in chat asked about the soundtrack. So I subscribe to a service called Epidemic Sound, and that's where that track comes from. I don't know. I can't remember what specific track that is. But I just go kind of farming through things that I like the sound of and the speed of in Epidemic Sound. I'll try to remember to look at the tracks that I'm playing through in the lead in to the video. Okay, so then I started talking about your agenda. So there's 3 items on the agenda. There is path in all capital letters, and then there is path in all small letters, and then there is VI. So path, these are big topics. So probably you saw me do this gesture when you couldn't hear me talking, but I was saying the overarching goal of this course is to have you at the end of the course feel confident that you can operate a computer on the command line only with text, with no mouse, with no graphics, just by typing commands. That remains the overarching goal of the course. But the topics that we're dealing with this week are sort of some of the bigger takeaways for the course in terms of the things that I hope that you learn and understand and that they stay with you, because they're all useful, but particularly the 2 path words. Those are useful to understand in any computing environment that you might work in. So the all capital PATH path is something that if you understand it, it is useful to know in Windows, Mac, and Linux environments. And I'll go into the details when we dig in. The all little letters path is also useful in any of those computing environments. So those 2 concepts are very important concepts for us in the semester. At a point, I will stop talking about big P path and little p path as new concepts, and I will just talk about them as something that we all understand what they are. But that'll be in a while from now. For a while, I will work to remind you when I'm talking about big P path versus when I'm talking about little p path. Unfortunately, those are the words that are used to refer to those concepts. So you just get used to hearing them and understanding based on their context what we mean when we say path. But both of those concepts can be used and applied in Windows, Mac, and Linux type environments. The last one is VI. VI is a text editor. So for some of you, it might make sense if I say VI is a little bit like Microsoft Word, except for with a lot less fancy features in it. So VI allows you to edit literally just simple text. So VI will not let you make things bold. It will not let you underline things. It doesn't have any features in it to make numbered lists for you automatically. You can't insert pictures. Its job is simply to allow you to open files, type text at the keyboard, and then save those files with the information inside. So it's a text editor. And more technically correct, it is a plain text editor, meaning it really doesn't work in anything other than the characters you see on your keyboard. But even in Microsoft Word, 90+% of the content that you create is just text. Okay, so why is VI special? Because it is universal in the Linux and Unix world. If you sit down at a Linux or a Unix computer, or any system that is built on top of Linux or Unix, you will find a VI text editor in there, which means that if you know how to use the VI text editor, you can create and edit content on those systems, which is a big deal. It is a weird text editor. The way that it works is different than almost, unless you've used VI, you will not have used a text editor that works this way. So it's going to be weird. It's going to feel awkward. It can be frustrating at times at first, but you only have to memorize just a little tiny bit. And the best way to do that is practice. And you can become competent using VI to create files with information in them, to edit those files, and so on. So it's a text editor, but it's a bigger deal than that because it is hard to learn, but it's also universal to Linux and Unix systems, which means that once you know how to use VI, you should never find yourself sitting at a Linux or a Unix system where you can't edit text. If you're on a Mac, by the way, and you open up your terminal, VI should be in there as well. You won't automatically find this on Windows, but you can install it. Anyway, so be patient with VI. It is weird and it is awkward at first until you develop just a little bit of muscle memory. Then it's no big deal at all. Okay, so I'm gonna walk through the module for week 4, and then we'll go over to the Debian system that I'm running and do some experimenting. So let's do that first. Okay, so the goals for this week are to introduce you to Big P path. So when I say Big P path, I'm referring to paths, and when we document Big P path, we will write it as all capital letters to differentiate it, from little p path, which is related a little bit, but a different concept. So it's hard that in the Linux and Unix worlds, we use both of those terms to mean two pretty different things. Same word, different concepts. But you'll get used to hearing it, and you'll kind of understand based on where it's placed in a sentence, its context, which kind of path we're talking about. And then in little p path, there's actually 2 kinds of little p path. So that seems like a lot, and it might be slightly confusing at first, but once you get the basic concept down, and then you just sort of have to use it constantly, which you will in this class, you'll get accustomed to it. And then the other is to be able to open a file, do some edits in it, and save those edits using the VI text editor. VI, by the way, stands for the visual text editor. And you're going to think that it doesn't really offer much visually. So why would they call it that? But we'll talk a little bit about that when we get it open and play with it. Okay, so readings as always. By the way, you're going to see some references to VIM, which is VI improved. We're going to use VI improved because VI or Vim users like myself, we exclusively use VI improved. But all of the basics are the same. So we have regular VI, and then we have VIM, which is VI improved. It's hard to tell the difference unless you use some of the fancier, more complicated features. So just note that we are using VI this week, even though your documentation is going to say VIM for VI improved. What we are learning is the same for both. So we sort of have supercharged VIM and then regular VI. And VI is the one that we'll work with for a while. Okay. The lab assignment. So I will call your attention, as I need to do every week. There are hands-on experiments from the lab. So the reason why I provide these, and let me open them in a separate tab. In case you are wanting to do some practice with the things that we're learning this week, but you kind of don't know, like, what should I do? And I can't really think of any ideas to practice on. I've created these hands-on experiments so that at least there's something that you can do if you're having trouble coming up with an idea that you could practice with. So in this case, the hands-on experiments is mostly about opening a file with the VI editor, typing some text in it, and then saving the file, and then maybe reopening it and doing some edits. So this is just to give you an idea for some possible content for a file. That's what's there. Anyway, and there's just a few instructions about the things you should try while you have VI open to try to get comfortable with it. But you'll see me do that during the live stream today. I'm going to open, I'm going to be in the virtual machine. I'm going to use the VI editor to open a file, add content to it, save it, reopen it, edit the content, that kind of stuff. Okay. The Piazza discussion. So I like this one this week because historically people in the class find really interesting resources here. So we'll be in week 4. The discussion you're looking for is the VI/Vim tutorials online. So if you find something that's for VI improved, it is just as good for our purposes as anything that says just for VI alone. They are mostly interchangeable, and they're certainly for our purposes entirely interchangeable. So we're looking for what you can find for tutorials. There's some cool tutorials out there for learning to use the VI editor that help you develop muscle memory for the way the keys work. There is no mouse in VI, and that's one of the things that's weird to people is how do I do different things in VI? If I don't have a mouse, then I can click on menus and buttons. So we'll talk about that. And then finally, this is a pretty normal week with a lab and a discussion as always. So yeah, that's where we're at. So I'm going to switch views, and I hope that my mic doesn't drop, but I'm going to double check it this time before I get to talking for too long. So let me switch over to, okay. So I think, yeah, it looks to me like you can still hear me. I'm going to go ahead and be paranoid and double check though. Okay. Yeah. I think the audio is still good. Okay. So this is my minimal Debian. Okay. Thank you, Kay. I appreciate the backup. So thankfully there's some people here who can catch me if I go mute by mistake. Okay, so this is my minimal Debian. For those of you on M1 Max, if you didn't find it, one of your classmates messaged me early last week. There is a minimal Debian available in the UTM gallery, so you can have this same setup even if you're not using VirtualBox like the Windows users are. Oh, that's weird. I don't know what happened to chat. Unless maybe Robo, did you click on the little arrow in Twitch and remove the chat? So I'm not even in Twitch. I'm using the streaming software. I can see chat, but it's not the same chat as online. Maybe you hit a key that closed the chat window. Okay, so let me log in to my minimal Debian. But the point is, hopefully everyone can gain access to a minimal Debian. The reason why we're using this minimal Debian is because I want to prove to you that you don't need graphics to do work on a Linux system, but I also would love it if you have that same experience where you basically the mouse goes away and all you have is the keyboard and commands at your fingertips. If you can learn to operate a computer that way, then there's no computer that you can't operate. I don't remember what I did for login stuff. I hope that I used the username that I like for myself, jvoid PASSWORD. Okay, thank goodness. If you should forget a password, well, you can let me know. I'll show you at some point if you forget a password, but probably write these down, especially since these are not production systems. So security isn't a huge deal on these virtual machines since we're just using them for this little stuff. Okay, so we're talking about big P path versus little p path. So I'm going to describe them just with words, and then eventually I'm going to open up a text document. I'm going to type out some notes about little p path and big P path. Big P path, you can actually see that it is a thing that has information associated with it by typing this command and pressing enter. So echo space $, PATH, all capital letters. It has to be spelled that way. But if you press enter, then you'll notice that this actually has information associated with it. And we call big P path an environment variable, which is exactly what it's called in Mac and also actually what it's called in Windows. Mac and Windows both have this big P path in them. You can go into system settings in a Windows machine and find environment variables. And on a Mac, you can open up a terminal and type echo path just like I have done, and you will get this information. So big P path. It is an environment variable, and I'll type this out when we get VI going in a second and we review the whole thing. So this is a list. So we have /user/local/bin, and then a colon. You probably can't see me brushing a mouse over it. You can't. Then a colon, and the colon is just saying end of one entry, beginning of the next. So often we might use commas to make a list like this, but in this case, Linux is using colons to represent different items in the list. So we have user local bin, and then we have a second entry, which is /user/bin, and then a third entry, which is /bin, and then a fourth entry, which is /user/local/games, and then finally a fifth entry is /user/games. So what is this list? This list is the list of locations that the shell will search through to find commands that you type. Now, not every command is stored this way, but for the most part, if you type a command, what has to happen is the shell has to go search for it, find it, and then execute it. So if I type ls, for example, what the shell has to do is accept this command ls, go locate the executable for this command on the system, and then execute it. Of course, we don't see that when we run the command. It just looks like, oh, it ran the command, and that's all fine and good. Now, we're going to add a new command to our repertoire, which is which, WHICHLS. And this command tells us where the shell is finding the ls command. So the shell tells us, I am finding the ls command in /user/bin. And this is where big P path comes into play. Because if we go back to that original list of big P path, we will see that the second entry is /user/bin. So the reason why the shell found ls where it found it is because it was looking there. So when I type in ls, the shell is actually going to go look for ls in /user/local/bin. If it does not find it there, then it goes to /user/bin. And if it finds it there, then it executes it. If it doesn't find it there, then the shell will move to the next entry in the list, /bin, and it'll just keep going. The shell will until it either runs out of big P path to search through, or it finds the command. So let's does CD? Let's see if CD is in there. So CD is one of the commands that is not on the system. It's actually just running inside of the shell itself. What about date? Okay, so there's date, which is also in the location /user/bin. So this is a lot to take in. But the idea is that the shell keeps a list of locations to search for commands. When you type a command, the shell looks through that list until hopefully it finds that command and then it executes it. That list is what we call big P path. That is that list of locations that the shell will search for commands in. Big P path. And you can echo Big P path and you can see the list of locations that the shell is told to look. So let's try another command. I'm just going to type my name. So I get a command not found. So what happened here? So I type Boyd, I press enter, the shell takes Boyd and it begins to look through Big P path to find a match. So it looks in /user/local/bin. There is no Boyd in there. So then it moves on to /user/bin, and there's no Boyd in there. So then it moves on to /bin. There's no Boyd in there. It moves on to /user/local/games. There's no Boyd in there. And then finally it goes to /user/games. There's no Boyd in there, at which point the shell prints out an error message saying, I cannot find Boyd, the command. And what that tells us is that nowhere in that path, Big P path, none of those directories in that list contain a command called Boyd. That's what Big P path is. So this is a new thing to add to your understanding. When the shell tells you that a command is not found, that can mean two things, possibly. One thing it could mean is that the command is not installed on your system. But another thing it can mean is that the command, maybe it's installed on your system, but it is not in your Big P path. And in fact, it not being in your Big P path is the one reason why you would get a command not found. So Boyd, the command is not found because it is nowhere in my Big P path, which usually means that it's not installed, but not always. Sometimes the command is not in a traditional location. So it may be on your system, but not on your Big P path. And that would be a reason why the shell will not find a command. And this is true in Mac and it's true in Windows. If you type a command and you get an error saying that the command cannot be found, you kind of have to check two things. Is the command installed on your system, and also is it on your Big P path where the system can find it when it goes looking for it? Okay, so that's Big P path. We can add entries to Big P path, and we will add entries to Big P path at a future date. So this list is not fixed. It can be updated. It can have items removed from it. It can have items added to it. So we're not stuck with this one Big P path. We can actually change our Big P path so that we tell the shell to look in different or more or fewer locations or some combination of those things. So Big P path. Where does the shell look for commands? You'll notice that CD didn't show any location on it. And let me see, is that what is? Nothing appropriate. There we go. So I'm just kind of giving you this. This is bonus material, really, but so one of the sort of checklists you can run if you're typing a command and you feel like it ought to be found, or you don't know where it is or how the shell's. So you can type which space the command, and if the shell can find it in the Big P path, it will tell you where it found it. You can type what is space the command, and for some commands you will get some information. In this case, the shell said nothing appropriate. And then the last in that checklist is type, TYPD, TYPE, space CD. That's this last command that I typed, which in this case says is a shell built-in. And what that means is that it's not actually a command on the system. It's actually something built into the shell itself. And all this is a lot, and it can be confusing at first. But I also wanted to kind of close the loop on why does CD kind of seem weird. CD is weird because it is something that's built into the shell environment itself. And there are other commands that won't be found on your big P path because they might be just built into the shell itself. Like echo is another one that's not on your path. Oh, it is on your path. Well, there you go. Anyway, try that with different commands just to see what happens. Try which echo. What is echo? There, I got some information. Type echo. And this is going to look different for different kinds of commands. So which, what is, and type can help you kind of hunt down some basic information about the location and the purpose and how the command is identified in your shell environment. We'll try it with VI as well. Okay, so that's big P path, and that's actually easier than little P path. So little P path is referencing the actual sort of address on the system of a file or directory. So big P path is a list of directories that the shell searches through for commands to execute. Little P path is the address or location on your system of any file and directory. And we have a variety of tools that we use to work with path or that require path information. PWD, as an example, will give me the little p path of my present working directory. So this is the little p path. So my present working directory is /home/jboyd_t. That is the address or the location on my system of the directory that I am presently located in. Notice that it starts with the /home/jboyd_t. We call that an absolute path. And an absolute path is referring to the fact that this is the path starting at the root of the entire system's tree down to the specific location that I am asking about. That is an absolute path, /home/jboyd_t. And it turns out that the which command actually gives you the absolute path when it has it as well. So in the case of this command which, we're actually getting kind of both types of path operating. So which ls is asking the shell to print out the little p path of a command that it found by searching through the list that is the big P path. That's kind of crazy, isn't it? And it's a lot of that word path to take in. So /user/bin/ls is the location of the ls command on this system. It is an absolute path, an absolute little p path, because it starts at the root folder / and then traces its location through the tree, the directory tree of the system, to the location of ls. Okay, so that's little p path. Absolute little p path. Starts at /. Okay, so now let's do some weirder things. So I'm going to do a listing. And just to get you thinking about it, when I do a listing, the behavior of the ls command is to list my present working directory just automatically. So I didn't have to say which directory to do a listing of. It just automatically listed the directory that I'm in, my PWD. But you can also use the ls command to list the contents of other directories. So you can, for example, use the absolute path of the root folder to do a listing of it. So that one kid asks, is little p path for commands? So little p path is the location of anything. So you talk about little p path to describe the location of every file and folder on the Linux system has a little p path to it. Big P path is the set of directories that the shell will look through to find commands. So absolute path is just talking about the location of any file or folder on the entire system, starting from the root folder. That's what absolute path means. In a Windows system, you'd give the absolute path to something by saying C:\\, program files, / Microsoft / all of that stuff starting at C:, in a Windows environment is an example of absolute path. In Mac and Linux environments, everything has an absolute path that starts at / at root. Okay, so the ls command, you can actually supply absolute paths to locations and get listings for them. So for example, I can list the contents of the root folder specifically. And those are the contents of the root folder specifically. And the way I got that is by telling ls the absolute path, little p path, the absolute path of the directory I wanted to see a listing of. So I can see for all the blue ones, etc., boot, home, dev, lost plus found, media mount, op, proc, root, run, serve, sys, user, and var. All those blue ones are folders that are subdirectories of the root. So I can do, for example, a listing of that directory. So this is an absolute path. I'm saying I want to list using the absolute path to /home. That is the home subdirectory of the root of the system. And I'll see in this case, there is one folder that is a subdirectory of the home subdirectory of root, which is jboyt. And I can also use absolute path to do a listing of that. So I'm using absolute path to tell the ls command which folder I want to see listings of. Now it turns out that the listing command without being given any other information is going to automatically do a listing of your present working directory. So you don't actually have to give it the absolute path of the directory you want if the directory you want is the one that you're in. So yeah, let me do week 3 in just a second. Okay, so there is ls using absolute path. I used it to list the root folder, which was this command. So ls space, and then I used an absolute path to say I want to do a listing on the root directory of the system. Then I used ls space, and then I used an absolute path to say not the root of the system, but the home folder that is a subdirectory of the root. So we just call that /home, and got a listing of that. And then finally, I did one that says, give me a listing using the absolute path of /home /jboyt, which happens to be my home directory. And it turns out that ls would have done that anyway because that's my present working directory. So these are a lot of things to sort of try out and think about what it is that's going on. So I just used ls with no extra information, which means that ls just says, I guess you want a listing of your present working directory, and it did that. But then I also used ls and supplied it with absolute paths, starting at / to different folders in the system. Now we're going to do it in the relative pathway. So relative path doesn't start at root. It starts at my present working directory. So we would say relative to my present location. And relative path uses shortcut symbols to represent it. So ... is now not building a path from root, but building a path relative to my present working directory. So ... means one up from my present working directory. So let me give you pwd. So if my present working directory is /home /jboyt, then one up from that would be whatever is the next one above jboyt, which would be /home. And that's the listing that we did earlier. If you go back up the screen where I did ls/home, it's the same thing. So I do want you to notice that in every case, literally in every case, you can use an absolute path or a relative path and locate the item on your system. In every case, you can use either of these things. You tend to use absolute path when it is easier, and you tend to use relative path when it is easier. So let's just look at an example. Let me clear the screen. Remind you where I'm at. So if I want to look at the contents of the /home folder, I have two sort of quick ways to do that. One is I can just say, well, just here's the absolute path to the folder I want to see a listing of. Or I could note the fact that, well, really that /home directory is just one above my present working directory. So I could use a relative little p path instead. And I get the same stuff. So they're interchangeable, and you tend to use absolute path when that's easier, and you tend to use relative path when that's easier. So here's another example. I'm still in /home/jboyd. Let's say that I want to see a listing of the root folder itself. So I could use an absolute path and say, give me a listing of the root folder. Or I could notice that from my present working directory, the root folder is 2 up. So I could, if I wanted to, say go up 1 and then go up another by relative path and get the same information. So you can always use a relative path. You can always use an absolute path. It's typically a matter of which one you find easier to type or understand, or some combination of those two things. Once you practice with it for a while, you don't have to think about it nearly as much. So notice ls// lists by absolute path. And the way I know that is because it starts at slash. List by absolute path the contents of the root folder. But I also could use a relative path and say one up from here and then another up from there, .. / ... is also the root folder, and I could get at that same information. So ls/, that's an absolute little p path. ls ... / ... is a relative little p path. Okay, so we're going to go one more, and it's because it's there, so you need to see it, but it's going to seem a little bit harder. So we have ... that for relative path purposes means one above my present working directory. Turns out that we can also use relative path for our present working directory with a dot. This will not seem very useful right now, so don't get hung up on it too much. But there will come a day when using this dot to represent our present working directory in a relative path will come in handy. So if I do an ls dot, I get the contents of my present working directory. So the single dot is a way to represent relative path to my present working directory. Now, why would I possibly put a dot in there if I don't have to? The answer is I wouldn't. But when we start doing some scripting, we will find situations where we need that dot, or to make life a little bit easier on ourselves and the shell. So ls dot, that dot references the present working directory, which means, by the way, that I can use the present working directory to build a relative path to one above the present working directory. So this is a relative path that says start in the present working directory and then go one up. Of course, we already noted that we don't actually need the present working directory part to go one up. We can just say ... and it represents the same thing. And of course, we don't need any of those things if we prefer the absolute path. If we know precisely the folder that we want to list, then we can just give precisely the absolute path and get it. I can also, by the way, list the root folder by starting at the present working directory, go one up from there, and then go another one up from there. That's the root, right? Now, why would I do that when I could just as easily drop the single dot and just go up to, or use an absolute path, which is way faster than either of those options. So I know that sometimes choice makes life more difficult for us, but this is just sort of the way that it works. Okay, so big P path is simply a list of directories. The shell uses it to try to find commands. Little p path is the location of every file and folder on the system. Every file and folder on the system has an absolute path that describes its location starting at root. Every file and folder can also be found using a relative path, which is its location relative to my present working directory. And we use both of them, and much of the time it's simply a matter of which one do I come up with faster, is easier to type, do I understand better? That's how we make that choice. Which one is easier for me right now, absolute or relative path, if I'm trying to locate something. Okay. So now we're going to do a couple of really weird ones, just so you can kind of... no, I guess I won't be super, super weird. But I'm going to do a listing, and remember, a listing without giving it any path information, a little p path. So I'm not saying list a specific location, I'm just saying list. By default, the ls command is going to list my present working directory. Okay, that's fine. So now we'll just use some relative path to move around. So if I want to change directories, you can see the blue week 3 folder. If I want to change directories into that, I have two ways of doing that. I could change directories into week 3. So just tell change directories, find that week 3 folder that is a subdirectory of my present working directory and go into it. Or if I want to, I can have the more explicit relative path and say from the present working directory to the week 3 folder. The present working directory part in this case is optional, but you might consider using it for a while just to get used to the idea. So what does this /week3 mean? It means from the present working directory / the week 3 subdirectory. And now I am in it. And if I do pwd, then I see the absolute path of my present working directory, which is / which is where absolute paths start, /home /jboyd/t week 3. I'm going to go back up one. So I can, the quick way to go back up one is cd space .. which goes back up one. But I could also say from my present working directory, which is the week 3 folder, go up one, which would be my home folder. Which again, you might just practice with this to get used to the idea, at which point I am back in my home folder. So that is changing directories with relative path. You can also change directories with absolute path. It's just usually harder to type. So if I want to go to my week 3 folder, I can use the absolute path to it. I can say I want to change directories into the week 3 folder, which is a subdirectory of the jboyd folder, which is a subdirectory of the home folder, which is a subdirectory of root. And I can do that. Again, absolute little p path, relative little p path can pretty much always both be used. When we start scripting, the rules will change a little bit, but from the command line, you can pretty much use relative or absolute path just based on what's going to work out best for you right now. So notice I did a change directories command with an absolute path as my target. I want to change directories specifically to that week 3 folder. And from here, I can change directories specifically to the root folder. I think it'll let me do that. Let's try it. Yep, so now I am in the root folder. Now from here, to go to my home directory, I'm going to use, since I can't go, if I try to go up from here, I can't go up any further. I'm as high up in the tree as I can go. There is no going down shortcut. I could say from root, go down into home, go into JBoyT, go into week 3, and that would work just fine. But since I'm already in the root folder, adding the extra dot for a relative path doesn't really make my life any easier. Might as well just use the absolute path and say, I just want to change to /home/jboyt/week 3. So for me, it's usually a matter of which is going to be easier to type right now. So do I have a whole bunch of dots and slashes all over the place and I start to lose track of what I'm doing? And maybe it's just easier to use the absolute path. Or am I just moving up one folder? And the quick way to do that is ... And I just do that. So that just takes practice, basically. You have to kind of get in there, try some different commands that use path, like ls and cd. Try them with absolute paths, try them with relative paths, and see what it feels like. Okay, so there is big P path, there is little P path. I have some brief notes in there. You can see echo path. That which command, which tells you a couple of things. It tells you where on your big P path the command is found, and it also, its result is the absolute path where it was found. So they can be related sometimes. I'll make some notes though when we start to use VI. All right, so big P path is that list of folders that the shell searches through for commands. That's it. Little P path is the location on your system. Every file and every folder on your entire system has an absolute path to it. Absolute path starts at root and then traces the subdirectories to the location of your directory or file on the system. And then relative path is usually we would think of that as a way of, as a shortcut way of locating directories and files on the system with these shortcut symbols dot and dot. Okay. And I'm going to use VI to make some notes about those things as well. So third and last thing, the VI command. So do I have some stuff in here? I do. I'm going to make a week 4 folder. I'm going to go do stuff in there. So make dir. Make dir, by the way, uses path. So I can just say week 4, and I recommend that you put a slash on the end. We talked about this last week. So make dir, if you give it a directory name, assumes that you mean a subdirectory of the present working directory, but you can be explicit. Oops. You can be explicit in saying that you have a relative path that starts at the present working directory and creates a week 4 folder that's a subdirectory of it. The dot slash in this case is optional, but you might practice with it just to get accustomed to what it means, which is from where I'm at right now. So make a directory from where I'm at right now, dot, called week 4. And then if I do a listing, I'll see week 4. Now I'm going to change directories, and I'm going to use the fancy relative path from where I'm at presently. I want to go into the week 4 folder. And now I'm in the week 4 folder. When I type pwd, I see its absolute path on the system, which every file and directory has. All right, and now we'll use VI to create some content. So I am going to type VI, that is the editor command, and I'm going to give it a file name. I'm going to call it notes.txt. So when you use the command VI on a file and that file doesn't already exist, which it does not, let me prove it to you before I do it. If the file does not already exist, VI will create it and wait for you to enter text into it. So vi space notes.txt. If notes.txt does not exist, it will be created. If it does exist, it will be opened and I can go edit the file that had already been created. So I'm going to press enter. And this is where it gets hard. So just be slow and purposeful here. Take your time and be slow and purposeful. So we'll see on the screen that there's a bunch of tildes running down the left. Mine are blue. Yours may or may not be blue. A bunch of tildes down the left. That is basically possible space for content that is not as yet used. So one thing, pardon me, to note about VI is that it uses the entire screen. This whole screen now is the text editor running. It's not showing any text because this is a brand new file. And if you look at the very bottom of the screen, you will notice that VI is telling me this is a new file. Okay, so this is where, notice I haven't done anything else. I have not touched the keyboard since I did vi space notes.txt. I pressed enter. I'm not touching the keyboard. So now we need to take our time, be patient, because this part is weird. VI, and I'm still not touching the keyboard, although I can't hold my hands up like that. Oh, you can see. Okay. It is called a modal editor. You can see that in the agenda on line 18. It is a modal editor. What that means is that it operates in modes, and it only has 2 modes effectively. So you only have to worry about the fact that you can either be in one mode or the other mode. When you open a file, you are in command mode. And in command mode, you don't enter text into the file, you issue commands. So you can't just start typing and have it work in VI because you are in command mode, in which case you can only do command type things. You cannot enter text into the file. You can only perform commands. So what kinds of commands are there that are different from simply typing text? Some of the basic ones are saving the file, which is a command, quitting the VI editor, which is a command, moving the cursor around. VI is somewhat forgiving about this, but technically moving the cursor around is a command. It is not part of editing. It's a command to move the cursor. You can see it blinking at the top left of the screen. That's a command. Deleting text is a command. Doing a find and replace is a command. There's lots of those kinds of things that are commands. So some commands let you do operations on the text. Some commands let you do things like save the file and quit the program. But you need to get used to the idea that when you are in command mode, which I'm in right now, you can't enter new text into the file. And the most important key for your existence right now in VI is the escape key. When you press the escape key, no matter what mode you're in, it will put you back in command mode. So you can just aggressively press the escape key. Let me see if I get a beep. I don't, but I'm just pressing the escape key right now, which you probably can't hear. Maybe you can. I'll try to press it loud. I'm pressing the escape key, which is if I don't know what mode I'm in and I press the escape key, I usually just pound it a few times. It will put me back in command mode, and that's kind of the safe place because it's much harder for me to do things by accident, like enter text by accident or delete things by accident. So escape to get into command mode. If you're already in command mode, then it doesn't do anything. It just keeps you in command mode. But that's the safe place to be. Okay, so now let's do the other mode, which is insert mode. So you're either performing commands or you are inserting new text. So to get into insert mode, you press the I key once. You can't see a thing. Oh wait, let me get my cursor in here. Escape, 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 insert. Okay, so I just pressed the I key once, and nothing on the screen tells me that anything changed. I just have to know this, unfortunately. Now, there are ways to get more information, but for now, I press the I key. If I'm in doubt about what mode I'm in, press escape, 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 escape. I'm in command mode. All right, so I'm reset. Okay, I'm going to type something. So I'm going to hit I. I'm now in insert mode. I guess I held it down a little bit. I backspaced, by the way. So I held the I key down a little bit aggressively and accidentally typed some in. And I backspaced, which is fine. And then I'm going to start typing again. And what you're going to see, if you can see the cursor blinking, it's going to type over those things. So P-A-A-T-H. I held the P key down. Path. I'm just typing text. List of directories. I'm going to press enter. And it's hard to keep track of your editing when you're in VI, but you'll notice that the tilde on the next line went away and the cursor's there. I'm still in insert mode as far as I know, but if I forget, I'll hit the escape key a few times. Now I'm in command mode again. And then I will hit I once to be in insert mode, and now I can start entering text, which in this case is going to be spaces, list of directory, searches for commands. I'm still in insert mode. Enter. Still in insert mode. Echo path to view list. Still in insert mode. Now I'm going to hit escape and go back into command mode. Okay, so that's all it is. It's a way to edit text, and for a little bit, it's going to feel very awkward because you're not used to editing text like this. So just remember, when you are in doubt, press the escape key to get yourself in command mode until you're ready to be in insert mode. And you're going to find situations for a while where you don't know how to get text entered into the location that you want. So for now, just let it be a mess. It's fine. We're going to add VI commands that we can use in command mode over time to give ourselves more power over this text. But for the time being, just get used to switching back and forth between command mode and insert mode. Try typing some stuff. If you make a mistake, you can try to backspace. If it doesn't work, it's not the end of the world. You can just keep going and leave a mess. It's fine. And we will clean up the mess with additional VI features as we move along. Okay, so I'm in command mode. If I've forgotten whether or not I'm in command mode, then I'll just press escape. Make sure, absolutely sure, I'm in command mode. All right, so when you're in command mode is the time when you can move the cursor around without hurting anything. And there's two ways to do it. There's the way that most of you are going to end up doing it at first, which is with the arrow keys. So I'm just using the arrow keys, and you can see my little cursor moving around. Up and down, left and right. So that's all good. The cool way to do cursor movement is to not use the arrow keys, but use the H, L, I, and J keys. And the easiest way to experiment with this is I'm in command mode, escape, escape, escape. I'm going to move the arrow key kind of down into the middle. See it blinking over the E in searches. And then I'm going to practice with the H, L, I, and J keys. I'm in command mode. And that's where I want to be if I want to move the cursor around. And then I will experiment with the H, L, I, and J keys to move the cursor around. Why not just always use the arrow keys? It turns out that not every keyboard in the world has the arrow keys. That's sort of a modern convenience to have the arrow keys. So if you're ever on a computer that doesn't have arrow keys on its keyboard, which is not impossible, you can still do VI editing if you have learned how to move the cursor around without arrow keys. The way you do that is H, L, I, and J. So I'm going to use the H key and watch the cursor move. H, 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 H. It moved to the left. I'm going to use the L key now. L, 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 L. It moves to the right. So H to the left, L to the right. And with a lot of practice, as it turns out, but with enough practice, your fingers will just remember where to go, and you won't even need to lift them off the keyboard. All right, so that's H to the left, L to the right. J and K, so I'm going to press K. That's up. J, that's down. J down, K up, K up, K up. H left, 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 left. L right, 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 right. And I'm in command mode, so I'm kind of safe as long as I don't press that I key by mistake. If I press the I key, I will be in insert mode, and then all hell will break loose. I'll prove that. So I'm going to press the I key. No, I'm not. I don't want to do that yet. I'm going to be more careful than that. All right, so you can move the cursor around. The other thing is, just for our first, so in command mode, escape, 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 escape. Move the cursor to something that you want to delete. Let's say, well, let's just practice on the next line down. So let's move the cursor to the next line down, go into insert mode. So escape, escape, escape. I'm in command mode. I to be in insert mode, and then I will just type, I don't know, apple seed. Escape, escape, escape. Now I'm back in command mode. So I can use the arrow keys or the HJK, and L keys. I'm going to move over here and I'm going to delete some stuff. So from command mode, if you want to delete a character, you put the cursor on the character you want to delete. So notice that the cursor is on the S of Appleseed. I'm going to press X and delete it. So X deletes one character. I'm going to get rid of this E. So the E that the cursor is blinking on, or press X to delete it. The E that the cursor's on, I'm going to press X to delete it. And then the D that the cursor's on, I'm going to press X to delete it. Notice, by the way, at that point, there's nothing else on the line for the cursor to be on but that last E in Apple. I'm still in command mode. And if I'm in doubt, I can just press escape, 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 escape. And then I can use the arrows or the H, L, J, and K keys to move the cursor around in command mode. So again, when you're trying to get comfortable with this, just type stuff in there and don't worry about tons about mistakes. And I mean, this isn't, it's not a test, and it doesn't matter if your file looks pretty at the end. What I hope that it does, your experiments, is make you feel a little bit comfortable with this modal type of editing. But also that when we get some new commands to use, you'll think, oh, thank goodness, I was desperate to know how to do that in VI, because I just had this mess of a file and I didn't know how to fix it at that point. Okay, so there are a lot of commands in VI. So just sort of, you'll see that when you start looking through the VI manual, there are a lot of commands for doing a whole bunch of different things. But the fundamental ones are, how do I get to where I can insert new text? How do I get back into command mode so I can move the cursor around, delete characters I didn't want, that kind of stuff. Okay, so now we're down to the last couple of things. So how do I save a file, and how do I get out of VI? So we're going to look at sort of all the possibilities here. So make sure you're in command mode, escape, 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 escape. And I'm going to type colon. And when I type colon, you'll see now at the bottom left of the screen, there's a colon and a cursor blinking next to it. So these are enhanced commands. And there's a whole bunch of these as well, where you type a colon and then an enhanced command to go with it. But it's just a command. So this is the way that, these are the various ways that you can save and quit. So one thing to note is if I just type a Q, that's the quit command. VI won't let me quit if I have changed the file, at least not by default. So you'll see that red banner at the bottom. VI is telling me, wait a second, you've edited this file and you never saved it. Perhaps you want to do something different. So let's do the save command. So I'm going to type colon. I didn't do anything about the red banner, by the way. I just typed a colon to try a different command. So to save a file is in VI terms writing a file. So I'm going to write the file to disk. So if I do a :W, I have written the file, and you can see at the bottom it says it's a new file, 4 lines and 102 bytes were written to file. So now I have saved my work, and I can now type a :Q, and I can quit VI. And then I'm back at the command line. You can see the prompt at the bottom. I'm going to clear just to get back to the top of the screen. So let's reopen that file. It's called notes.txt. So vi notes.txt. Since the file already exists, what was I saying? Oh, since the file already exists, VI will just reopen it. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to insert some text. And I'm going to do this in part just to show you that there's going to be some awkward moments until we get some more commands to work with. So how do I type applesauce? Well, I just went into insert mode by typing an I, and I'm going to type sauce. Oh, wait. It seems to be inserting the text in front of that cursor. Well, that's okay. I'll just backspace to here, and I will get what I want. Now I have 2 E's, so I'm going to back over 1 and then hit escape to get in command mode and see what happens. Okay, so weird things like that are going to happen until you are used to using it. So I changed this to applesauce. And now if I try to quit by typing a colon, which will then drop the cursor to the bottom, and I say, okay, I want to quit, I get this red banner that says you've changed the file, but you didn't save it. You didn't write it. But it also tells me use an exclamation point to override. So this is useful to know. If I am unhappy with what I just did and I just want out and I don't want any of the mess that I just made of my file, I can quit with an exclamation point, and that tells VI throw away all of those recent edits and take me back to the last time that I saved the file, which in this case was when I opened it. So I'm going to :Q exclamation point quit without saving. And now when I reopen the file, applesauce, which I decided I didn't want to keep, has gone away. Okay, so one last thing. Let me move the cursor down here. That's as far as I can move it, is on the E in Apple. So, oh yeah, wait, backspace, ESAUCE. I could use this as an opportunity to practice deleting characters, by the way. So I'm going to escape to be in command mode. And then I'm going to put the cursor on one of these E's. It doesn't really matter which. And delete it. I'm still in command mode, but if I'm in doubt, press escape a whole bunch of times. So I'm in command mode. All right, so the last one of the day, which is, what if I want to save and quit at the same time? Well, you can do that. You can do colon. Notice that the cursor is at the bottom left now, colon. So I'm going to write, which is the word for save in VI. I'm going to write the file, which means save it, and also then quit. So I can write and quit all in one fell swoop. And there's where I'm at and what I have. So for discussion this week, if you go looking, you will find that there are tutorials and tools to assist you with learning how VI works a little bit, and those can be helpful, and some of them are actually fun in my opinion. But just know that VI can be frustrating, and the only way to sort of get over the initial unpleasantness about the modes is to simply use them. So open a file, start typing stuff. You got to get into insert mode to do that. Hit escape to get in command mode. Practice saving the file. Quitting without saving. Don't worry if your file is a mess. Don't worry if your file has stuff in it that you wish wasn't there anymore. We will add new commands in the coming weeks, and you will have a lot more power to do a lot nicer editing in VI over time. So, but the only way to get comfortable with it is to see if you can make files with it. So if you have some note taking you can do in VI, that would be great. Or you can just use the hands-on experiments, which has a little idea about something that you might use just to practice with VI. Escape to get in command mode. That's the big one. That's sort of your safety valve. Okay. That's everything. You guys are doing a good job. So thank you for that. For paying attention to the details and getting the work done. Hopefully things are going well for you. Thanks for your patience if you're on one of the M1 Macs. I think we have everything we need now, and hopefully you're getting more comfortable with that environment. So I hope you find it at least interesting, sometimes challenging. The word that I use is just, it's kind of neat. It's just neat to see what a system's doing without all the graphics on top of it, and kind of learn how it's put together and how do I move around the system and how do I create content. To me, it's just kind of neat and a fun thing to do. So I hope that the larger part of you are having an experience that's like that. Okay, I got to stop. Thanks for being here live if you were able to be here. I appreciate it. And thanks for having my back that I was muted at first. I'll clip that part of the video out just so there's not wasted a couple of minutes not hearing anything. And then I will see you next week. If you're watching the video later, I hope you have had a good week up to now. If you have questions, same places as always: office hours, Confer Zoom, drop-in office hours, Piazza, Canvas inbox. Otherwise, have a great week, and I will see you on Monday morning next week.